History, as we are reminded, is rarely made by mobs or by moments. It is crafted in parlors, behind closed doors, and in the quiet calculations of determined men, those who grasp both the weight of the past and the fragile architecture of the future. In the case of British Columbia's entry into Canadian Confederation, the architect was Anthony Musgrave, a man with the face of a bureaucrat and the instincts of a statesman. The year was 1869. The British Empire was exhaling its last breath on the Pacific coast, and the colony Musgrave was sent to govern was adrift, burdened by debt, dazed by distance, and torn between allegiances to London, Ottawa, or San Francisco. He arrived in Victoria that August with what he himself called the clear, settled purpose of a singular mission. Unlike his predecessor, Frederick Seymour, a loyalist, who viewed Confederation with suspicion, Musgrave was chosen for his reliability. His orders from the Colonial Office were discreet but firm: deliver British Columbia into Confederation, and do it swiftly. As Margaret Ormsby later wrote, Musgrave was an architect working with uncertain materials and immovable deadlines. The colony's legislative assembly, an appointed cadre of merchants, magistrates, and bureaucrats, were more loyal to Britain than to the idea of Canada. The general population, meanwhile, was disengaged and fragmented. British Columbia was neither fully British nor fully Columbian. Its loyalties were cultural rather than constitutional. But Musgrave recognized that conditions on the ground, mounting debt, geographic isolation, waning subsidies, and the looming specter of American expansion had created a moment that demanded action. This was not about public sentiment. It was about precision and control.
On the 9th of March in 1871, a great debate occurs in the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia. This is in Victoria, and it's held in the Birdcages, which was the Parliament buildings of the time. Charming building, sadly not still with us. Here in the Legislative Assembly were all the great voices of British Columbia's future, trying to decide on the terms that had been worked up by the arrangements that were forthcoming with Ottawa. In that room were all the giants of the time: Governor Anthony Musgrave, who's the architect of the project. And as I've said on another occasion, Lord Granville in the Colonial Office was the godfather of the whole project, and Anthony Musgrave can be said to be his man. John Robson of New Westminster, the famous journalist, is pro-Confederation. Henry Creese from the legal professions is very strongly in favor of it as well. Joseph Trutch, who's the strongest of all of them in favor of Confederation, is there. And there's Tyrrell Drake from the law field, and Henry Holbrook. These are all the master craftsmen of the new future.
From September 1869 to early 1870, Musgrave began what historian Gene Barman would later describe as an elite, engineered political realignment born of necessity. There were no referenda or public rallies. The drama of Confederation played out among fewer than 24 men, seated in a legislative chamber, but its consequences were continental. Musgrave began with reconnaissance, meeting the executive and legislative councils and aligning with key Confederationists John Robson, the firebrand editor, Amor De Cosmos, the eccentric reformer, and Dr. Robert Carroll, a respected legislator. These men did not need persuasion. They needed elevation. Between February and April 1870, the Legislative Council convened to draft the terms of union. 5 issues dominated the debate. Colonial debt. Years of overambitious infrastructure, chiefly the Caribou Wagon Road, had bankrupted the Treasury. Ottawa's promise to assume the debt and provide annual subsidies were essential, not only for solvency, but for survival. Number 2, the Transcontinental Railway. Canada's commitment to begin building a railway within 2 years and finish within 10 was a masterstroke. Musgrave and Joseph Trutch, Chief Commissioner of Lands and Works, insisted on this cause. Ormsby called it railway tracks laid in words, not yet in steel. Number 3, responsible government. Confederation would bring elected representation and a cabinet system. While some elites feared democracy would undermine their influence, Robson and others argued it was a right, not a risk. Number 4, Indigenous land title. Though rarely discussed publicly, the land question loomed. Trutch had already dismantled Indigenous land rights in the colony, and Confederation offered no clear change, only continued ambiguity. Discussions were often suppressed, especially by Attorney General Henry Creese, who warned that even raising the issue could provoke unrest. 5. American expansion. Musgrave used the U.S. purchase of Alaska in 1867 as a warning. If British Columbia did not join Canada, it risked being drawn into the American orbit. Britain would not provide more gunboats. Canada, Musgrave warned, was the only shield left.
Now, Trutch becomes the first lieutenant governor when the colony is established. He is a figure of great controversy in our current times in British Columbia because he was responsible for reducing the size of Indian reserves. Because he believed that the lands were not being used, they should be put back into the public domain. And herein lies the source of public disputation and anger about Joseph Trutch. I'd like to think of Joseph Trutch in another position here, which I commend everybody to think about as well. Now, Trutch is a powerful individual. He's a surveyor and an engineer. He has the force of conviction about railways, about steamships, about lands, about roads, about bridges. He sees the possibility of a unity of purpose that these British Columbians might get behind the idea of joining with Canada, and he continues to push it. He resembles to a large degree Sir John A. Macdonald in Ottawa. Now, Macdonald is one of these persistent fellows who never gives up on the dream. Now, we have other great people who claim that they're the fathers of Confederation along the lines, or fathers of certain provinces like Louis Riel. In the Dominion of Canada, undoubtedly Sir John A. Macdonald is the one. We also know him for the reservation schools question. And Trutch for British Columbia is a parallel case. He's in favor of the Confederation. He strongly backs it. But then again, there's another question which relates to the size of the native reserves, which blacklist him. But I urge students of the Canadian Confederation to think as to what was happening in the year 1871. And it was at that time that Trutch becomes forward as the mover.
The debates, March 9th to the 11th. On March 9th, the Council finally agreed to shift the matter to a committee of the whole, signaling Musgrave's intent to expedite debate with controlled procedure. The following day, Attorney General Henry Creese defended government officials for earlier supporting Confederation in principle, but delaying discussion until imperial backing arrived. John Sebastian Helmcken, former Speaker and reluctant Confederationist, criticized the terms as an imperial script rather than a genuine reflection of the colony's will. He voiced concerns that council members were being used as routine participants in a government-driven initiative. On March 11th, David Babington Ring of Nanaimo delivered a cautious address, defending the right to fully debate the resolution and chiding the language some used to impugn official members, a sign of the rising tension. From March 14th to the 17th, responsible government took center stage. The conversation shifted in mid-March toward responsible government, the coveted principle of self-governing autonomy. On March 14th, T.B. Humphreys from Lillooet declared forcefully, "No responsible government, no Confederation," emphasizing the need for democratic responsibility to accompany political union. John Robson, speaking on March 16th, echoed the sentiment, arguing that BC would surrender not merely federal questions, but all local control if it entered Confederation without full self-government in place. Creese, on March 17th, placed limitations, acknowledging that while changes to governance should come post-Union, embedding responsible government within the terms was premature. March 18th to the 21st, economic appetite and trade elements. On March 18th, council members turned to economic provisions. Amor De Cosmos proposed a duty-free provision for specific goods, like silks and tropical fruits, arguing such liberalization would strengthen trade on both sides of the Rockies. The debate reflected broader concern about protecting BC's fledgling economy and ensuring mutual benefits from union. March 22nd to the 25th, transcontinental railway and debt assumption. As March passed on, focus turned sharply to the transcontinental railway. Council members, urged by Musgrave and Joseph Trudge, pressed that Ottawa's commitment was more than just a promise. The railway would be built within 10 years, and Ottawa would assume BC's debt. On March 25th, a motion to postpone further debate until the Chief Commissioner recovered was rejected, signaling urgency to finalize the legislative package. March 29th to April 4th, final amendments in the vote. In the final days of March, council members focused on Indigenous title, terms of subsidy, and amendments to responsible government clauses. Henry Holbrook attempted to introduce discussion on Indigenous affairs, but was rebuffed by Attorney General Creese, who warned that such discussions risked unsettling Indigenous communities. Debate closed the first week of April. April 1st to 3rd, minor amendments were made, and the final terms of the Union consolidated Ottawa's commitments and BC's reservations. On April 4th, under Musgrave's guiding hand, the Legislative Council formally ratified 37 resolutions in favor of union. Ormsby praised Musgrave's balanced diplomacy, while Jean Barman highlighted the elite-driven nature of the process. W. L. Morton viewed it as the final moment of imperial realism in the Pacific, a transfer of burden without a loss of prestige. The legislative sessions from March to April 1870 reflect not a grassroots movement, but a calculated, elite-led negotiation. With discipline and discretion, Musgrave guided the colony into Canada through strategic maneuvering, not mass mobilization. History, in this case, did not wait for unanimity. It waited for momentum, and at the center of that movement stood Anthony Musgrave, Britain's final envoy to the West, who delivered not by force, but by foresight. Join us next time for Part 17 of the Canada History Society's 20-part series as we explore the meeting with Canada, the negotiations.